It was a bright morning, the kind of morning where everything seemed calm and ordinary, and yet sometimes the most ordinary days turn into something unforgettable. A little girl only 6 years old woke up full of energy. She loved mornings like this because the sun was soft. The birds chirped happily and the air smelled fresh. She ran to the kitchen where her mother was making breakfast, the smell of toast and warm milk filling the room. She laughed as she tried to help, spilling a little milk and getting a tiny drop on her shirt. Her mother smiled but didn't scold her, because mornings were always a time for gentle patience, a time when small mistakes didn't matter. After breakfast, she put on her favorite dress, a bright yellow one that matched her cheerful mood, and ran outside to play. The park near her home was quiet that morning. Usually it was full of children, laughter, and the squeak of swings, but today, only a few people were walking along the paths. She loved to explore the park, looking for bugs, flowers, and birds, often stopping to notice the tiniest things that adults didn't always see. She had a curious mind and a heart that cared deeply, even though she was still so small. Far from her, a man walked slowly along the path. He looked important, but today he was not in his office, not in a meeting, not surrounded by assistants. Today he just wanted a moment of peace. The man was wealthy and successful, someone who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, yet this morning, he just wanted to feel the breeze on his face. People sometimes thought of him as untouchable, someone who could do anything he wanted. But even the richest, most powerful people have moments when they are simply human, and today was one of those moments. The little girl wandered close to where he was walking. She didn't notice him at first. She was busy chasing a butterfly that fluttered lazily in front of her. She giggled as she ran after it, her small shoes barely making a sound on the soft path. The man smiled faintly when he noticed her, a small reminder of simpler joys he rarely allowed himself. For a moment, the park felt like a world apart from the one he usually lived in, a world where money, power, and meetings didn't matter, and only simple happiness existed. Then suddenly something changed. The man stopped walking and held his chest. At first he thought it was just a cramp, a small ache from yesterday's long meeting, but the pain intensified quickly, sharp and frightening. He stumbled slightly, grabbing onto a nearby bench to steady himself. People walking nearby started to notice and whispered to each other. Some were frozen in panic, unsure what to do. The little girl, still chasing her butterfly, noticed the sudden movement and the commotion. Her curiosity made her pause. Something in her small heart told her that someone needed help. She ran closer, her tiny feet pattering softly on the path. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice small but clear. The man tried to speak, but a sudden wave of pain made it hard for him to breathe. He shook his head slightly, fear in his eyes. Adults around him were unsure what to do. One person looked at another and then another, but no one moved. In that moment, the little girl's courage shone. She had no fear, only a desire to help. Even at 6 years old, she understood that sometimes you didn't wait for others to act, you acted yourself. She looked around and noticed a security guard walking nearby, someone she assumed worked for the park. "Help!" she shouted, pointing to the man. "He's hurt. He needs help." Her voice was tiny compared to the panic around, but there was something in her tone that made people take notice. The guard rushed over, his eyes wide as he saw the man clutching his chest, struggling to breathe. "Call an ambulance," the girl added, running to the nearest phone booth. She could barely reach the buttons, but she pressed them carefully, repeating herself when the numbers didn't register the first time. While waiting for help, she didn't panic. She stayed by the man's side, holding his hand gently, talking to him to keep him calm. "It's okay," she said softly. "Help is coming. You're going to be okay." Her words were simple, but they carried a comfort that no adult could have given in that moment. She reminded him to breathe slowly, to stay calm, and though she didn't know the full weight of what was happening, she somehow understood that staying calm could save a life. The man's face, full of fear just moments ago, slowly began to soften. He looked at this tiny child, barely older than a toddler, and something about her presence brought a strange sense of peace. He tried to speak, to thank her, but his words came out as faint murmurs. Still, she didn't leave his side, and her focus never wavered. People started to notice her bravery, whispering among themselves. "Look at that little girl," one said. "She's helping him. Can you believe it?" Others nodded, some shocked, others inspired, as they realized that the courage of a child could sometimes outshine the hesitation of adults. Finally, sirens in the distance told them that help was on the way. The little girl stayed calm, guiding the man gently to a safer position on the grass while the guard knelt beside him. "Almost there," she whispered. When the paramedics arrived, they quickly took over, checking his vitals and giving the necessary treatment. The man's breathing steadied, and relief washed over everyone around. But it was clear who had made the difference. The little girl had acted when others hesitated, had brought attention to the emergency, and had given comfort when it was needed most. After the man was taken safely into the ambulance, the little girl watched from a distance. She didn't fully understand the gravity of what had just happened, but she knew she had helped someone, and that was enough for her. Her heart was still racing with excitement, but also a quiet pride. She had done something brave, something extraordinary for someone who seemed so far removed from her small world. That night, at home, she told her parents about the event, describing it in her own simple words. She didn't say she was a hero, because heroes were big and important in stories. She was just a little girl who did what she thought was right. Her parents listened, amazed, their hearts swelling with pride. They hugged her tightly, telling her she was brave and kind and that one day she might not even remember how powerful her actions had been. But the world in that small park would not forget. Unbeknownst to the little girl, her simple act of courage would soon change her life forever. The man she helped, the billionaire, was a person who rarely had moments like this. A moment where life seemed fragile, and a child's small hands could make the difference between hope and despair. He would never forget her, and in the coming days, her life would take turns she could never have imagined, all because she had been brave, kind, and alert on that ordinary morning. And so, the story of that day began, not with grand events, not with fanfare, but with the simple, powerful courage of a 6-year-old girl who saw someone in need and acted without hesitation. In her world, it was just another day. In his, it was a day that reminded him of the goodness that still existed in the world, and the extraordinary ways it could appear when least expected. Little did she know, this moment would be the first chapter of a life forever touched by courage, kindness, and the ripple effect of a single brave act. The morning that had started like any other had left a mark that the little girl did not yet understand. Though she had returned home after the incident at the park, her mind kept wandering back to the man she had helped. She couldn't stop thinking about how fragile life could be, and how sometimes the world could change in the blink of an eye. She went about her day as usual, playing with her toys, helping her mother with small chores, and laughing with her friends. But there was a new feeling inside her. It was a mix of pride, wonder, and curiosity, a sense that she had done something important even though she was only 6. Meanwhile, the man she had helped was safe in the hospital, surrounded by doctors and monitors, recovering from the scare that had gripped him earlier. The event had shaken him deeply. For all his money, influence, and power, he realized that he could not control everything. Life was delicate, and sometimes the smallest actions, even from the most unexpected sources, could make the biggest difference. He thought of the little girl constantly, wondering who she was, how she had managed to remain so calm, and how such a small person could have such a big heart. Within a day, the story of what had happened in the park began to spread. People who had witnessed it shared their amazement at the little girl's courage. Some took photos, some recorded videos, and others told their friends and family. Social media picked up the story, highlighting the unusual bravery of a child who had saved the life of a billionaire. While the world marveled at the event, the little girl herself remained unaware of just how far her actions would reach. She was not seeking recognition. She had only done what she felt was right, simply because she wanted to help someone in need. Her parents noticed that she was different now. She seemed more aware of the people around her, more thoughtful about her actions, and more confident in her own decisions. They encouraged her to talk about her feelings and praised her for her courage, but they also tried to shield her from the overwhelming attention that was beginning to grow. They knew that the world could be harsh, especially to someone so young, and they wanted to protect her innocence as much as possible. Still, there was no denying the change in their little girl. Something extraordinary had happened, and it had opened a door in her heart that could never be closed. The billionaire, meanwhile, was determined to meet the girl who had saved his life. He had sent messages through his assistants trying to find her and her family. He wanted to thank her personally, not with money or gifts, but with genuine gratitude. He knew that her courage had been more valuable than anything else in the world. Finally, after a few days, his team located her family, and arrangements were made for a meeting. The little girl's parents were cautious at first. They did not want their daughter to feel pressured or overwhelmed, but they also wanted her to understand how much she had mattered. They explained to her that someone very important wanted to meet her to say thank you. When the day of the meeting arrived, the little girl was nervous, though she tried not to show it. She had never met anyone like this man before, someone with so much power and influence, someone who could travel the world in private jets, make decisions that affected thousands, and yet still was here in their neighborhood because of her. She held her mother's hand tightly as they walked into the quiet room where he waited. The man stood up when he saw her, smiling warmly. Despite his serious appearance and the suits he usually wore, his eyes were kind, and there was a softness to him that made the girl feel comfortable. "Hello," he said gently. "I think you already know this, but you saved my life. I want to thank you." The little girl looked at him with wide eyes. She did not fully understand the weight of his words, but she could feel their sincerity. She nodded shyly, not saying much, because sometimes words were not enough. The man knelt slightly to be closer to her height and extended his hand. She shook it carefully, and for a moment, there was a quiet connection between them, a shared understanding that life could be changed in the smallest of ways. The billionaire's gratitude was not just a formality. He wanted to show her that her actions mattered, that courage and kindness were recognized and cherished. Over the next few hours, he told her about how he felt when the pain first struck him, how he had feared the worst, and how her calmness had made all the difference. She listened intently, her small hands folded in her lap, absorbing every word. She felt proud, not because of fame or attention, but because she had truly helped someone in need. Soon, the story began to reach even more people. News outlets and social media channels shared the meeting, showing the little girl being thanked for her bravery. Interviews were arranged with her parents, but they always kept her perspective central, letting her speak only about how she had felt and what she had thought in that critical moment. People were inspired by her honesty, her simplicity, and the way a child's courage could impact the life of someone so powerful. The world started to see that bravery was not about age or strength, but about acting with a pure heart when it was needed most. The little girl's life began to change slowly. Her school noticed her bravery and dedication to helping others, praising her for the example she set for her classmates. Friends looked up to her in new ways, and teachers encouraged her to share her experiences in safe, supportive ways. Her parents, while proud, also ensured she remained grounded. They continued their routines, emphasizing that the world was big and complicated, and while her actions were extraordinary, she was still a child who needed love, care, and normalcy in her life. Even the billionaire wanted to help her in ways beyond recognition. He invited her family to spend time with him, offering mentorship opportunities and experiences that could broaden her understanding of the world. He spoke of kindness, responsibility, and using one's gifts to make a positive difference. Though she was still very young, the little girl absorbed these lessons naturally. She learned that courage could open doors, that empathy could bridge divides, and that the simplest actions could sometimes change the course of someone else's life forever. Despite the growing attention, she remained humble. She did not think of herself as special. To her, she had just done what anyone would do if they had noticed someone in danger. Her bravery had been instinctive, a reflection of her kind heart and quick thinking, not something she had planned or sought. This natural humility made her story even more compelling to the world, as people realized that true heroism often came from simple, unassuming acts, not from fame, money, or power. As the weeks passed, her confidence grew. She began to speak more openly about helping others, encouraging friends and classmates to act with kindness and courage. She started small projects at school, like helping younger children or organizing games that included everyone. The little girl who had once wandered the park, chasing butterflies, had begun to understand the ripple effect of her actions. She learned that even one small act of courage could inspire many, and that her voice, though young, could be powerful when used with care and empathy. Her parents continued to guide her, emphasizing the importance of staying true to herself. They taught her that fame was temporary, but character and integrity lasted a lifetime. They reminded her that helping others should always come from the heart, not for recognition or reward. And through it all, the little girl remained the same cheerful, curious child she had always been, with a heart full of love, a mind full of wonder, and a growing understanding that life could change in the blink of an eye. By the end of part 2, the little girl's life had already transformed in subtle but meaningful ways. She had learned about bravery, empathy, and the power of simple actions. She had met someone whose life she had touched profoundly and had begun to see that her own life could be filled with possibilities she had never imagined. The event at the park was no longer just a moment of emergency. It was the beginning of a journey that would shape her values, inspire those around her, and remind the world that courage knows no age. And as she lay in bed that night, thinking about everything that had happened, she smiled softly to herself. She did not know exactly what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. Helping someone, even in the smallest way, could change everything. And for a little girl with a kind heart and fearless spirit, the world was now full of endless opportunities to make a difference. After the incident and the meeting with the billionaire, life for the little girl began to feel different, even though everything around her seemed the same. The streets were the same, her school was the same, and the park where she had played countless times still held the familiar scent of grass and flowers. But inside her something had shifted. She felt stronger, braver, and somehow more aware of the world around her. What had once seemed ordinary now carried a sense of possibility. She realized that even small actions could make a difference, and that understanding stayed with her in every step she took. At school, things began to change subtly. Her classmates looked at her with a new kind of admiration, not just because she had met a famous man, but because they had heard about how calmly she had handled a life-or-death situation. Teachers spoke of her courage as an example of doing the right thing, even when it was difficult. While she didn't seek attention, she began to notice that her actions had inspired others. Some children tried to help classmates more carefully. Some shared more with friends, and some even started speaking up in ways they hadn't before. Without realizing it, she was becoming a quiet leader, showing that kindness and bravery were qualities anyone could have. Her parents noticed the change too. The little girl was more thoughtful in how she acted, paying attention to small things that might help others. She would ask if an elderly neighbor needed help with groceries, or if a friend was feeling sad, and she tried to comfort them in her own gentle way. Her parents smiled, proud that she was learning lessons that went far beyond her age. They encouraged her to continue being compassionate, telling her that the world needed more people who cared enough to act. But they also reminded her that she didn't have to do everything alone. Even small efforts mattered, and it was okay to ask for help when she needed it. The billionaire had not forgotten the little girl. He arranged for small ways to connect with her, sending letters and small gifts that encouraged learning, creativity, and curiosity. She received books about animals, space, and art, which sparked new interests in her young mind. He even invited her to a small educational event, where children could ask questions about how the world worked. She was thrilled, not because of the status of the people around her, but because she loved learning and experiencing new things. To her, each new experience was an adventure, a chance to see life from a fresh perspective. Despite the growing attention, she remained grounded. Her family made sure of it, keeping routines steady and predictable. They still had quiet breakfast together, afternoons in the park, and evenings filled with bedtime stories. These simple moments became her anchor, reminding her that while her actions had made a difference, her heart and happiness were just as important. She understood that being brave did not mean leaving behind the comfort of home or the love of family. It meant carrying that love into the world with courage. One afternoon, while walking in the park again, the little girl noticed a man sitting alone on a bench, looking worried. He was not the billionaire, but something about his expression caught her attention. Her curiosity and empathy guided her steps as she approached him. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft and sincere. The man looked up, startled by the presence of a small child, but there was no fear in her eyes. He explained that he was worried about his work and felt overwhelmed. Without even thinking, she sat beside him and listened. She didn't offer solutions, just attention and care, which sometimes mattered more than any advice. By the time she left, the man's shoulders seemed lighter, and he walked away with a small smile. This became a pattern. People began noticing the little girl helping quietly wherever she went. Sometimes it was listening to a friend at school. Sometimes it was helping a neighbor carry groceries, and sometimes it was comforting someone who had lost something precious. She had discovered the subtle ways courage and kindness could appear, often without recognition or reward. Her actions became a quiet force in her community, a reminder that one person, no matter how small, could make a difference in the lives of others. The story of the day she had helped the billionaire continued to spread. Interviews and media features began highlighting her bravery and thoughtfulness. People around the world were inspired by how a 6-year-old child could remain calm and compassionate in a moment of crisis. Some called her a hero, while others simply marveled at her instincts. But for the little girl, she did not see herself as a hero. She saw herself as a child who had noticed someone in need and acted. That understanding gave her humility, which only added to the sincerity of her story and made it even more inspiring to others. Her parents worried sometimes about the attention. They wanted to protect her from the pressures that could come with fame, especially at such a young age. They reminded her that while it was wonderful to be recognized, her value was not measured by what others thought of her. They encouraged her to focus on learning, playing, and enjoying her childhood. And she did. She still chased butterflies in the park, played games with friends, and laughed freely, blending the extraordinary moments of her life with the ordinary joys of childhood. One day, the billionaire invited the little girl and her family to a small gathering. It was not extravagant, just a quiet event where they could meet some of his close friends, learn about his work in helping communities, and explore ways to make a difference together. She was amazed not by the wealth or status of the people there, but by the stories she heard about helping others. She began to see the power of using resources and knowledge to create positive change. Her mind opened to possibilities she had never imagined, showing her that one act of courage could lead to many more opportunities to do good in the world. During this time, she also learned more about responsibility. Her parents and the billionaire's guidance helped her understand that courage was not just about a single act, but about making choices that reflected empathy, thoughtfulness, and care. She began to consider how her words and actions could impact others, learning the importance of kindness in everyday life. The little girl discovered that even simple gestures, helping someone cross the street, sharing a snack, or comforting a friend, could carry as much weight as a heroic rescue. Her confidence continued to grow. She started speaking more clearly about her experiences, explaining how she felt during the moment at the park, and how she had tried to stay calm. People listened, not just because of the story, but because of the way she spoke with honesty and heart. Her words reminded everyone that courage was not about size, age, or strength. It was about heart and intention. The little girl, in her quiet way, had begun teaching the world that bravery could come from the smallest among us, and that the impact of kindness could reach far beyond what anyone could imagine. Even as the world watched her, she remained focused on the simple joys of childhood. She painted pictures, read stories, and played with friends, blending the extraordinary attention she received with the ordinary moments that made life sweet. She understood that balance was important. Courage and recognition were meaningful, but happiness and growth were equally vital. This understanding made her story resonate even more, showing that even those who perform great deeds need the grounding power of love, family, and simple daily routines. By the end of part 3, the little girl had already grown in ways that went beyond her years. She had learned about empathy, courage, responsibility, and the impact of small actions. She had begun to see that one moment in a park could ripple outward, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. And while she remained just a child, she carried within her the quiet knowledge that she could influence the world, one kind and brave action at a time. And so, her journey continued, not with grand gestures or constant attention, but with the quiet, steady, and sincere courage that had always been her nature. The little girl had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that sometimes even the smallest among us could create extraordinary change. And though she didn't realize it fully yet, the days ahead were filled with new challenges, lessons, and opportunities, all waiting for her to face them with the same heart that had guided her on that life-changing morning. As the days passed, the story of the little girl who had saved the billionaire continued to grow. It was no longer just a local story. It had captured the hearts of people far beyond her neighborhood. Newspapers, television channels, and social media platforms shared her bravery, describing the calm courage of a 6-year-old who had acted when adults had hesitated. Many people called her a hero, though she herself did not think of it that way. To her, she had only done what she thought was right. Yet the world saw something extraordinary in her actions. something that inspired hope and reminded people that courage could come in the smallest of packages. The attention brought new experiences for the little girl. People she had never met wanted to meet her, to shake her hand and to hear her story in her own words. She met other children who had done brave things, sharing stories and understanding that courage was something everyone could carry, no matter their age. These meetings were exciting but also overwhelming at times. Her parents made sure she was always guided and protected, teaching her that while admiration and attention were nice, they were not the measure of her worth. What mattered most was the kindness and courage in her heart. One day she received a personal invitation from the billionaire himself. He wanted to spend time with her and her family, not just to thank her again, but to show her how her actions had inspired him and others to think differently. She was nervous as she traveled to his office, a place she had only seen in photos and videos. But the moment she walked in, she realized that he was not someone to fear. He greeted her warmly with a gentle smile and kind words, making her feel safe and valued. He spoke to her about the importance of helping others, not for recognition or reward, but because it was the right thing to do. During this visit, the little girl learned more about the work he did to help communities and people in need. He explained how one small act could ripple into something much larger, inspiring more acts of kindness and courage. She listened carefully, fascinated by the idea that her actions could have consequences she had never imagined. It was a powerful lesson for someone so young, that even simple deeds like speaking up or offering help could change lives. She felt proud, not because of the wealth or power around her, but because she understood the impact of her own heart and choices. The billionaire also invited her to see some of the community projects he supported. They visited schools, hospitals, and neighborhoods where people were working hard to improve their lives. The little girl watched as adults helped children learn, provided food for those in need, and built safe spaces for communities to thrive. She began to see how courage, compassion, and generosity could come together to make a real difference. It was a world she had never known, yet she felt a connection because she could see how one small act, like hers at the park, could lead to something much bigger. Back at school, her life had changed in subtle ways. Friends and classmates were curious about her experiences, asking questions and listening eagerly to her stories. She shared lessons about staying calm, helping when it was needed, and believing that even a small child could make a difference. Teachers noticed how she had grown, not just in confidence but in empathy. She became a role model, not because she sought attention but because her actions spoke louder than words. Children around her began to try small acts of kindness, learning that bravery and care were not limited to big gestures. They could happen every day in small, thoughtful ways. The little girl's family watched these changes with a mixture of pride and concern. They were proud of her courage and compassion, but they also wanted to make sure she remained grounded. They emphasized the importance of staying humble, reminding her that recognition was fleeting but the impact of genuine kindness lasted forever. They encouraged her to continue enjoying the simple pleasures of childhood, playing in the park, reading books, and laughing with friends, because they knew that balance was important. Courage and empathy were vital, but so was joy and the freedom to be a child. One afternoon, the billionaire arranged a special gathering for her. It was not grand or overwhelming, just a small event with children and adults who shared stories of helping others. The little girl listened as others spoke about their own experiences, and she shared her own story about the morning in the park. Her words were simple, honest, and heartfelt. She spoke about feeling scared at first, about trying to stay calm, and about the importance of helping someone in need. The audience listened in silence, captivated not just by the story, but by the sincerity of a small child who had faced a moment of fear with courage. The event also gave her the chance to meet children from different backgrounds and communities. Some had done small acts of kindness, while others had faced challenges and found ways to help themselves and others. She realized that bravery and empathy were universal, crossing age, culture, and circumstances. Everyone had the power to make a difference, and her experience was proof that even the youngest could inspire hope. The little girl felt connected to these children in a way that was meaningful and lasting, understanding that courage was not measured by size or fame, but by heart and action. As her story continued to spread, she began receiving letters and messages from people around the world. Children wrote to her, sharing their own experiences and asking how they could be brave and kind like her. Adults wrote, expressing admiration and gratitude, and some even shared how her actions had inspired them to do more for their communities. The little girl's heart swelled with a quiet pride. She did not do these things for recognition, but she was touched that her actions could motivate others. She began to understand that courage and kindness could ripple outward, reaching places and people she had never imagined. Her parents continued to guide her, making sure that while the world saw her as extraordinary, she remained connected to the simple truths of life. They encouraged her to continue helping others but also to care for herself, to play, rest, and enjoy her childhood. They reminded her that her value was not measured by attention or admiration, but by the love, compassion, and courage she carried in her heart. And she listened, balancing the extraordinary experiences she was living with the ordinary joys of home, family, and friendship. The little girl also began to think about her future in new ways. She realized that she could use her courage and empathy to do more than she had ever imagined. She started dreaming about helping others on a larger scale, perhaps by learning to care for people in need, teaching children about kindness, or creating ways for communities to support each other. Even at 6 years old, she understood that the world was full of opportunities to make a difference, and that her small actions could be the beginning of something much larger. Through all of this, she remained humble and grounded. She never boasted about her bravery, and she did not seek fame or attention. Her joy came from helping, from seeing others smile, and from knowing that her actions mattered in a real and meaningful way. People admired her for this, seeing a rare combination of courage, humility, and heart. And though the world recognized her as a hero, she saw herself simply as a child who had done what she could when it mattered most. By the end of part 4, the little girl's life had begun to change in ways that were profound yet gentle. She had learned about courage, empathy, responsibility, and the ripple effect of kindness. She had met people who inspired her, and she had inspired others in return. Her life was no longer just about the ordinary routines of school, play, and family. It had expanded to include experiences that shaped her understanding of the world, of bravery, and of what it meant to care for others. And as she lay in bed at night, reflecting on everything that had happened, she smiled softly. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but she understood something very important. The courage to act, the willingness to help, and the choice to be kind could change the world in ways she could never imagine. Her journey was far from over, but the little girl knew that with a heart full of courage and love, she could face whatever came next. Her story was no longer just about a single moment in a park. It had become a story about hope, inspiration, and the power of a small heart to make a big difference. And though she was still a child, she carried within her the quiet strength that would guide her through life, reminding everyone she met that bravery and kindness could change the world, one act at a time. The little girl's life had already been touched by an extraordinary moment, but as time passed, she began to see just how far that single act of courage could reach. What started as a simple morning in the park had grown into a series of experiences that shaped her understanding of the world, herself, and the power of kindness. She began to understand that bravery was not just a one-time action, it was a way of living, a choice to face challenges with a calm heart and a clear mind. And though she was still very young, she was learning lessons that would last a lifetime. Her parents watched with awe as she navigated this new reality. They had always known she was special in her own quiet way, but the attention and recognition that followed her heroic act revealed something even more remarkable: the ability to inspire others without seeking attention or reward. Her parents encouraged her to continue living with courage, humility, and compassion, teaching her that these qualities were more valuable than fame or praise. They reminded her to stay grounded, to enjoy the simple joys of childhood, and to remember that being kind and brave could make the world a better place. One morning, she received an invitation to attend a special event celebrating acts of courage and kindness from children around the world. The event was not about money or power. It was about recognizing the hearts of children who had made a difference, no matter how small. She felt nervous at first, unsure what it would be like to meet other children who had done extraordinary things. But as she traveled to the venue with her parents, she felt a growing sense of excitement. She knew that this was another chance to learn, to grow, and to see how small actions could ripple into something much larger. When she arrived, she was greeted by children from many different countries, each with their own story of bravery and kindness. Some had helped strangers in emergencies, Others had worked to protect the environment, and some had stood up for friends or family members when no one else would. Listening to their stories, she realized that courage and kindness were universal, crossing language, culture, and circumstance. Each child had made a difference in their own way, and together, they formed a network of hope, showing that even the youngest could impact the world. The little girl shared her story with the group, speaking slowly and clearly. She told them about the morning in the park, about how she had noticed the man in trouble, and about how she had tried to help. She admitted that she had been scared at first, but that she had remembered to stay calm and act. The other children listened intently, nodding and smiling. Many were inspired by the simplicity and sincerity of her words. They realized that bravery did not require power or fame. It only required a heart willing to act, even when it seemed small or insignificant. The event organizers also invited adults who had been inspired by the children's actions to speak. The billionaire who had been saved by the little girl shared his experience, explaining how her calmness and courage had made a life-or-death difference. He spoke about the ripple effect of her actions and how it had inspired him to support more initiatives to help children, families, and communities in need. His words touched everyone in the room, showing the little girl that her actions had truly mattered, and that courage and kindness could travel far beyond what anyone might imagine. After the event, the little girl had the opportunity to participate in workshops designed for children like her. They learned about helping others, problem-solving, and understanding the needs of people around them. She discovered that courage could take many forms, not just in emergencies, but in everyday life. Speaking up for someone who is treated unfairly, helping a classmate who is struggling, or simply being kind to someone who feels lonely, were all ways of showing bravery and care. She realized that every small action mattered, and that she had the power to influence the world positively, even at her young age. When she returned home, she began to apply these lessons in her daily life. She helped classmates who were shy or struggling, comforted friends who were sad, and found ways to include everyone in games and activities. Her teachers noticed the change, remarking on her thoughtfulness and leadership. She was becoming a role model, not because she demanded recognition, but because her actions spoke louder than words. Children around her were inspired to be kinder and braver, understanding that courage was not reserved for special moments. It could be part of every day. Her parents continued to guide her carefully. They reminded her that while recognition was wonderful, it was not the goal. The true value of her actions lay in the positive impact she could create. They encouraged her to maintain balance between helping others and caring for herself, between extraordinary moments and ordinary joys. The little girl listened, understanding that the